Socrates and the Search for Truth, The Beginning of Philosophy, Episode 2, Part 6, Can Virtue Be Taught? If there was one question that remained at the heart of Socrates' philosophy, it was this: can a person become good by being taught, or is virtue something we are simply born with? To Socrates, this was not an abstract debate. It was a question that reached into every aspect of human life. If virtue can be taught, then education becomes one of humanity's greatest responsibilities. If it cannot, then the pursuit of wisdom takes on a very different meaning. To answer this question, Socrates first asked a more fundamental one: what is virtue? Before deciding whether it can be taught, we must understand what it actually is. As with justice, courage, and wisdom, he discovered that many people confidently use the word without ever examining its true meaning. Some believed virtue meant bravery. Others associated it with honor, wealth, political success, or obedience to tradition. Yet each definition captured only part of the whole. In dialogues such as the Meno and the Protagoras, Socrates carefully examined these assumptions. Through his method of questioning, he challenged every definition that failed to explain the universal nature of virtue. He was not interested in examples of virtuous people. He wanted to know what all virtuous actions shared in common. What is the essence of virtue itself? This search led Socrates toward a remarkable conclusion. He argued that genuine virtue is inseparable from knowledge. Human beings naturally desire what is good for them, but they often mistake temporary pleasure for lasting good. When people act unjustly, dishonestly, or selfishly, they do not do so because they clearly understand the good and deliberately reject it. Rather, they act from ignorance. They misunderstand what will truly lead to human flourishing. This idea became known as the unity of virtue and knowledge. To know the good is, in some sense, to become capable of doing the good. Wisdom is not merely the accumulation of facts. It is the ability to recognize what is genuinely beneficial for oneself and for others. Knowledge, therefore, carries an ethical dimension. It shapes character as much as it informs the intellect. Yet Socrates never claimed the question had been completely settled. If virtue is a form of knowledge, why do wise people sometimes act against their better judgment? Can moral excellence truly be transferred from one person to another, or must it be discovered through personal inquiry? These questions remain among the oldest and most enduring problems in philosophy, and they continue to challenge educators, psychologists, and ethicists to this very day. For Socrates, the search for virtue was ultimately the search for a well-lived life. Philosophy was not simply about understanding the world. It was about becoming the kind of person capable of living wisely within it. In that sense, education was never the passive acceptance of information. It was the lifelong cultivation of the soul through reason, humility, and the relentless pursuit of truth. Part 7. Know Thyself and the Care of the Soul. Inscribed upon the temple of Apollo at Delphi were two simple words that would come to define the life and philosophy of Socrates: know thyself. Although he did not claim to have coined the phrase, no thinker embraced its meaning more completely. For Socrates, the greatest journey was not across distant lands or into the mysteries of the heavens. It was the inward journey towards self-knowledge. Before we can understand reality, we must first understand the one who seeks to understand it. Socrates believed that most people devote enormous energy to caring for the external aspects of life. They pursue wealth, social status, political influence, physical appearance, and material comfort. They work tirelessly to improve their circumstances, yet often neglect the most important part of themselves. In his view, a person could possess great riches, command public admiration, and achieve worldly success while remaining deeply ignorant of who they truly were. This concern led Socrates to place the soul at the very center of philosophy. When he spoke of the soul, he was not referring merely to a religious doctrine or an invisible substance that survives death. He was speaking of the moral and rational core of the human being. The soul is that by which we reason, make choices, pursue justice, and seek wisdom. It is the seat of our character and the foundation of the life we ultimately become. To care for the soul, therefore, was not a matter of ritual or ceremony. It required constant self-examination. Every belief deserved to be questioned. Every motive required honest reflection. Every action invited us to ask whether it arose from wisdom or from ignorance. Socrates believed that a person who never examines their thoughts and desires lives at the mercy of habit, emotion, and public opinion. Such a life may appear successful from the outside, yet remain unfulfilled at its deepest level. This is the meaning behind one of his most enduring statements: "The unexamined life is not worth living." These words are often misunderstood. Socrates was not claiming that ordinary life has no value. Rather, he argued that a life lived without reflection fails to realize its highest potential. Human beings possess the unique ability to question themselves, to evaluate their actions, and to consciously pursue truth. To ignore that capacity is to neglect one of the defining characteristics of our humanity. Self-knowledge also demanded intellectual honesty. Socrates urged his companions to recognize their own biases, prejudices, and limitations. He understood that the greatest obstacle to wisdom is often the illusion of certainty. A mind convinced that it already possesses the truth has little reason to continue searching. By contrast, a mind that remains open to correction continues to grow throughout life. Humility, therefore, was not a weakness, but a necessary condition for genuine understanding. For Socrates, the health of the soul was far more important than the condition of the body or the accumulation of possessions. Wealth can be lost. Beauty fades with age. Political power rises and falls. The character of the soul, however, shapes every decision we make and every relationship we form. A just and disciplined soul brings harmony to life, while an ignorant and disordered soul becomes the source of confusion and suffering. These ideas would profoundly influence Plato, who later developed an elaborate philosophy of the soul, virtue, and ultimate reality. Yet the foundation was laid by Socrates himself. He taught that philosophy begins not with distant speculation about the universe, but with the courageous examination of one's own life. Before we seek to understand the cosmos, we must first understand ourselves. In that simple yet demanding challenge, Socrates left humanity one of its most enduring philosophical legacies. Part 8. Reality, Knowledge, and Objective Truth. As Socrates questioned the people of Athens, a deeper philosophical conviction gradually emerged beneath his conversations. He believed that truth is not created by human opinion. It exists independently of what any individual happens to believe. The task of philosophy is not to invent reality, but to discover it through reason, careful inquiry, and the honest examination of our assumptions. This conviction placed Socrates in direct opposition to many of the sophists, influential teachers who argued that truth often depends upon perspective, persuasion, or social convention. According to this way of thinking, what appears just to one person may seem unjust to another, and no objective standard exists by which to settle the disagreement. Success belongs not to the one who possesses truth, but to the one who argues most convincingly. Socrates rejected this conclusion. If justice changes with every opinion, then justice itself has no meaning. If goodness is merely a matter of preference, then morality becomes nothing more than personal taste. If truth belongs only to those with the greatest power or the strongest rhetoric, then philosophy loses its purpose entirely. Socrates believed there must be something more enduring than shifting beliefs and changing customs. This is why he spent so much time searching for universal definitions. When he asked, "What is justice?" he was not collecting opinions. He was seeking the essential nature of justice itself. The same was true of courage, wisdom, friendship, beauty, and virtue. These ideas, he believed, possess an objective reality that reason can gradually uncover. Human beings may disagree about them, but disagreement does not alter their true nature. For Socrates, knowledge was therefore something fundamentally different from opinion. Opinion can be inherited from parents, absorbed from culture, or accepted simply because it is popular. Knowledge demands something more. It requires evidence, logical consistency, and the willingness to submit every belief to critical examination. A person who cannot explain why they hold a belief has not yet transformed opinion into understanding. This distinction between opinion and knowledge became one of the defining themes of Greek philosophy. It also raised a profound question that Socrates himself never fully answered. If objective truths truly exist, where do they exist? Are they found within the physical world, or do they belong to a deeper and more permanent level of reality? How can imperfect human beings come to know truths that never change? It would be Socrates' greatest student, Plato, who attempted to answer these questions through the theory of forms. Plato argued that justice, beauty, goodness, and every universal concept exist as eternal realities beyond the changing world of appearances. In many ways, Plato's philosophy can be understood as an attempt to complete the search that Socrates had begun. The legacy of Socrates lies not in a finished system of metaphysics, but in the conviction that truth exists whether we recognize it or not. Reality is not determined by majority opinion, political authority, or personal preference. It is something that patiently waits to be discovered by minds willing to question, to reason, and to follow the evidence wherever it leads. In that enduring commitment to objective truth, Socrates laid the intellectual foundation upon which much of Western philosophy would be built. Part 9. The Trial of Socrates and the Courage to Question. By the age of 70, Socrates had become one of the most recognized and controversial figures in Athens. For decades, he had walked the city's streets questioning politicians, poets, craftsmen, generals, and ordinary citizens. Some admired his commitment to truth, but many came to resent him. His relentless questioning exposed false confidence, challenged accepted beliefs, and embarrassed powerful individuals who were unaccustomed to having their ideas examined in public. Eventually, opposition to Socrates reached a turning point. In 399 BCE, he was brought before an Athenian jury and formally charged with impiety for allegedly failing to honor the traditional gods of the city, and with corrupting the youth by encouraging them to question authority and think for themselves. Beneath these legal accusations, however, lay a deeper conflict. Socrates represented a way of life built upon reason, self-examination, and intellectual independence. To many of his critics, this spirit of inquiry appeared dangerous to the stability of Athenian society. Plato preserves Socrates' defense in the dialogue known as the asterisk apology. Rather than pleading for mercy or attempting to flatter the jury, Socrates defended philosophy itself. He argued that his questioning was not an act of rebellion, but a public service. Like a physician treating an illness, he believed he was helping his fellow citizens awaken from complacency and examine lives that had too often gone unquestioned. Socrates insisted that he had never claimed to possess perfect wisdom. His mission was simply to encourage others to seek truth honestly and without fear. If his questions exposed ignorance, that was not an insult, but an opportunity for growth. A society that discourages inquiry, he warned, risks replacing wisdom with unquestioned opinion. During his defense, Socrates uttered one of the most enduring statements in the history of philosophy: "The unexamined life is not worth living." These words summarized everything he had taught. Human beings possess the unique capacity to reflect upon themselves, to question their assumptions, and to pursue truth through reason. To abandon that pursuit would be to abandon one of the highest expressions of our humanity. The jury remained unconvinced. Socrates was found guilty by a narrow margin. According to Athenian custom, both the prosecution and the defendant could propose a punishment. While his accusers demanded death, Socrates refused to beg for leniency or deny the value of his life's work. With characteristic irony, he suggested that a man who had spent his life serving the city deserved public honor rather than punishment. Although partly humorous, the remark reflected his sincere belief that philosophy benefits society by encouraging wisdom instead of complacency. The jury ultimately sentenced him to death by drinking a cup of hemlock. Friends urged him to escape while there was still time, but Socrates refused. He believed that if he abandoned the principles he had defended throughout his life, then every lesson he had taught would lose its meaning. Philosophy required integrity, even when that integrity demanded the ultimate sacrifice. The trial of Socrates was more than the condemnation of a single individual. It revealed the enduring tension between free inquiry and established authority, between the pursuit of truth and the comfort of unquestioned belief. More than 2,000 years later, his defense continues to remind us that genuine philosophy often requires the courage to ask difficult questions, even when those questions come at a personal cost. Part 10. The legacy of Socrates and the birth of Western philosophy. When Socrates drank the cup of hemlock in 399 BCE, many believed they had silenced a troublesome philosopher. Instead, they had ensured that his ideas would outlive the city that condemned him. Although Socrates never wrote a single book, his influence spread farther than that of nearly any philosopher in history. His greatest student, Plato, preserved his conversations in a series of remarkable dialogues, allowing future generations to encounter not merely a set of doctrines, but a living example of philosophy in action. Through Plato, the questions of Socrates became the foundation of Western philosophy. Plato transformed his teacher's search for universal truth into the theory of forms, arguing that justice, beauty, goodness, and every perfect idea exist as eternal realities beyond the changing physical world. In many respects, Plato's entire philosophical system can be understood as an attempt to answer the questions that Socrates had spent his life asking in the streets of Athens. Plato's own student, Aristotle, would continue the conversation while disagreeing with many of his teacher's conclusions. Rather than locating reality in a separate realm of eternal forms, Aristotle argued that form and matter exist together within the concrete objects of the natural world. Yet even where Aristotle departed from Plato, he remained deeply indebted to the spirit of Socratic inquiry. The careful definition of concepts, the use of logical reasoning, and the relentless pursuit of truth all trace their roots back to Socrates. The influence of Socrates did not end with these two philosophers. His commitment to reason shaped the development of the Stoics, who taught that wisdom and virtue are the highest human goods. His emphasis on questioning inspired the skeptics, who challenged claims of certainty. His concern for ethics became the starting point for centuries of moral philosophy. Even today, universities, law schools, medical schools, and classrooms throughout the world continue to employ the Socratic method as a way of encouraging critical thinking rather than passive memorization. What makes Socrates so extraordinary is that his legacy rests not upon a completed philosophical system, but upon a method of inquiry. He offered no final theory explaining the entire universe. He did not claim to possess ultimate knowledge. Instead, he demonstrated how truth should be pursued. He showed that wisdom begins with intellectual humility, grows through honest dialogue, and requires the courage to question even our most deeply held beliefs. This is why Socrates remains relevant more than 24 centuries after his death. The world has changed dramatically. Civilizations have risen and fallen. Science has transformed our understanding of nature. Yet the fundamental questions he asked remain as urgent today as they were in ancient Athens. What is justice? What is virtue? How should we live? How do we distinguish knowledge from opinion? What does it mean to seek truth honestly? In an age saturated with information, Socrates reminds us that information alone is not wisdom. Facts can be memorized without being understood. Opinions can be repeated without ever being examined. Philosophy begins when we pause long enough to ask whether our beliefs are actually true and whether our reasons for holding them can withstand careful scrutiny. Perhaps Socrates' greatest gift to humanity was not a collection of answers, but a way of thinking. He taught that truth is not something to be accepted blindly, nor is it something created by personal preference. It is something to be sought through reason, dialogue, humility, and the lifelong examination of oneself and the world. Every great philosopher who followed entered a conversation that Socrates had already begun. As we conclude this exploration of his life and philosophy, we can see why he is often called the father of Western philosophy. He redirected the course of human thought from unquestioned certainty to disciplined inquiry. He showed that wisdom begins with the recognition of our own ignorance and that the pursuit of truth is one of the highest callings of the human mind. The question that guided Socrates still stands before each of us today. Before asking what the true nature of reality might be, we must first ask whether we possess the courage to question our own assumptions. That is where philosophy begins. That is the legacy of Socrates. And it is the foundation upon which the entire history of philosophy was built.